The winds of March in Boston were beginning to herald the arrival of spring. Martha Wilson gazed out the window of her office and took a deep breath. As the founder of the architectural firm Wilson Design, she had established a solid reputation over the past decade. But today, her thoughts weren't about work, they were about a family gathering. "Martha, there's a call from Thomas," her assistant Claire said with a smile as she entered the office. Martha returned the smile and took the phone. "So, are you ready for tonight's dinner?" Thomas Clark's gentle voice resonated through the line. "Yes, I am," Martha replied, though there was a slight tension in her voice. "After all, it's the day we officially announce our engagement to my parents and sister." She gazed at the elegant emerald engagement ring shining on her finger. Despite being one of Boston's most highly regarded architects, Martha felt anxious about facing her family tonight. The Wilson family's large, traditional New England-style house stood on a quiet street in Beacon Hill. Martha's father, Edward, was a heavyweight in real estate development, and her mother, Linda, was a board member of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. While her parents were respected figures in society, they showed different faces at home. Martha paused at the front door and squeezed Thomas's hand. "Are you all right?" Thomas gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Yes, just." Martha searched for words. "I'm worried about how Ashley will react." Ashley Wilson had been raised as the apple of her parents' eye. She loved being the center of attention and never relinquished the spotlight at family gatherings. Since Martha was a child, her parents had praised Ashley's talents and beauty while remaining indifferent to Martha's achievements. The door opened, revealing Linda Wilson's perfectly made-up face. "Martha, Thomas. Welcome." Linda greeted them in a melodious voice. "Everyone's waiting." In the living room, Edward Wilson stood by the fireplace with a glass in hand. On the sofa sat Ashley, looking bored while checking her smartphone. "Hello, Martha," Edward offered a brief greeting before changing his tone as he turned to Thomas. "Thomas. How are you today? How's the design for our company's new office building coming along?" Martha couldn't hide her discomfort. Her father was always like this, dismissing her success while showing interest in her partner. Ironically, Martha herself had designed Wilson Development's new office building, yet Edward spoke as if he had commissioned Thomas's architectural firm. "Sir, Martha designed that building," Thomas politely corrected. "I only provided some advice." Edward looked momentarily confused but quickly recovered. "Yes, that's right. Well, it's a family talent, I suppose." Ashley finally looked up from her smartphone and cast a bored glance at the couple. "So, what's this important news about?" Martha and Thomas exchanged glances, and Martha stepped forward. "We're engaged." The room fell silent for a moment. Linda was the first to react. "Well, how lovely." Her voice contained more surprise than joy. "When did this happen?" "Last month," Martha showed her ring. "Thomas proposed at that restaurant along the Charles River." Edward set down his glass and offered perfunctory congratulations. "Congratulations, marriage is wonderful. By the way, what kind of wedding scale are you thinking of?" Before Martha could answer, Linda interrupted. "Considering your ages, perhaps something not too extravagant but rather a modest ceremony would be appropriate." "Mom, I'm only 35, Martha quietly protested. Ashley finally showed interest, staring at Martha's ring. "An emerald," she said somewhat scornfully. "Not a diamond?" "Emeralds are Martha's preference," Thomas answered gently but firmly. "I chose it to match her eye color." During dinner, the conversation repeatedly strayed from Martha and Thomas's wedding to Ashley's recent European trip and her new boyfriend. The parents listened attentively to Ashley's stories, asking questions. Martha and Thomas's engagement was treated almost like a side plot. By the way, Edward finally returned to the subject as dessert was served. "I wanted to discuss the distribution of grandmother's estate." Martha tensed. Grandmother Josephine had passed away 2 months ago and had been the only family member who truly understood her. Her moment of engagement joy was short-lived. Was this what tonight was really about? "Though the will reading is next week," Edward continued, "I should tell you in advance that Josephine specified that most of her assets go to Ashley." Martha, you'll only receive a portion of her jewelry collection. Martha was too shocked to speak. Given her relationship with her grandmother, this was unbelievable. May I see the will? Thomas quietly asked. Edward's expression soured. I'd prefer to keep the details private until it's officially read at the law firm. On the drive home, Martha was silent. Thomas took her hand and said, something doesn't seem right. I can't imagine your grandmother treating you that way. Martha nodded. I agree. But let's focus on the wedding preparations for now. The following week, wedding planning began. Her parents' support was minimal, and the budget was modest. Surprisingly, Ashley offered, I'll help with your wedding, sis. Really? Martha asked in surprise. Of course, Ashley smiled, though her eyes didn't. I want to make my sister's big day the best it can be. Martha accepted Ashley's offer. 2 weeks before the wedding, Martha was in her apartment going through final checks with her wedding planner, Julia. Thomas was away on business, so she was focusing on finalizing the details alone. We've received almost all the RSVPs, Julia said while checking items off her list. All that's left is the final seating chart adjustments and the cake tasting. Martha nodded. Ashley volunteered to handle the cake. She introduced me to a pastry chef she knows. That's unusual, Julia raised an eyebrow. Your sister helping out? Martha smiled wryly. Julia, a friend of 10 years, understood the complex dynamics of the Wilson family well. I'm surprised too. But should I just be happy about it? That weekend, Martha visited her parents' home. With Thomas returning on Monday, she went to her family home alone. As she opened the front door, she heard Ashley's voice from the living room. Yes, everything's ready. It'll be the perfect surprise. Martha stopped in her tracks. Ashley was talking to someone on the phone. Martha quietly moved down the hallway and stood near Ashley's bedroom door. She has no idea. Really, Martha is so oblivious. Mom and Dad are on board, and we're all planning it together. Martha's heart raced. What kind of surprise were they planning? Normally, wedding surprises meant warm gifts or touching speeches for the bride, but there was something unsettling in Ashley's tone. Sensing Ashley was about to leave the room, Martha hurried to the kitchen. Soon, Ashley entered the kitchen. Oh, Martha. When did you arrive? Ashley flashed a perfect smile. Just now, Martha feigned calm. Where are Mom and Dad? They're both at the golf club. They'll be back this evening. Ashley leaned against the counter and asked, how are the wedding preparations going? Fine, almost everything's settled, Martha replied. Thank you for the cake arrangements. The pastry chef you introduced seems very nice. Of course, Ashley tossed her hair back. It's my sister's special day. I'm really looking forward to it. Ashley's words sounded genuine, but her eyes held a different emotion. Martha carefully chose her words as she asked. Are you planning some kind of surprise? Ashley's expression hardened momentarily. Huh? What do you mean? Well, weddings usually come with surprises. I was wondering if you were planning something. Ashley regained her smile. Oh, that. Of course I am. But if I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? That evening, Martha called Thomas. I have a strange feeling, she confided. Ashley seems to be plotting something. What do you mean? Thomas's voice was tinged with concern. I overheard her talking on the phone. She said, it'll be the perfect surprise for my sister's wedding. Is that all? Thomas seemed somewhat relieved. Martha, I'm sure it's something nice. Maybe you're being a bit too nervous. Martha took a deep breath. Maybe you're right. But it'll be fine, Thomas said gently. I'll be back Monday, and we'll handle whatever comes up together. The next day, Martha visited Doris Hudson, her grandmother Josephine's close friend. Doris and Josephine had been friends for many years. She lived in a small house with a garden in the suburbs. Martha, I'm so glad you came, Doris embraced her. I've made tea. Please, sit down. Once they were seated in the living room, Doris's expression turned serious. I heard about Josephine's will. Martha nodded. Don't you think it's strange? Grandmother and I were especially close. That's exactly what's strange, Doris leaned forward. Josephine talked many times about leaving you a special inheritance. Not just her jewelry, but her old house and a considerable amount of investments as well. Martha's eyes widened. But my father said. Your parents and Ashley are acting strange, Doris said quietly. Since Josephine passed away, their behavior has been odd. Edward especially has called me multiple times, asking questions about his mother's final days. Do you know something? Martha grasped Doris's hand. Doris stood up and brought a small wooden box. Josephine asked me to give this to you. In her words, before Martha's wedding. Inside the box was an old key. A note attached read, Mother's study, bottom right drawer. Grandmother's house is still vacant, Martha murmured. The transfer procedures haven't been completed yet. Go quickly, Doris squeezed her hand. And be careful. Your family, they're not the people Josephine once knew. That afternoon, without waiting for Thomas's return, Martha went to her grandmother's house. The old colonial-style home was silent. She used the key to enter the study and opened the indicated drawer. Inside was a crossbody bag containing an SD card and a USB drive in its pockets. Feeling her heart race, Martha took out her laptop. She first checked the contents of the USB drive, which contained multiple folders with PDF files and audio files. Opening the first file, she found a copy of a will with a notary's certification. As Martha's eyes scanned the document, she saw a large sum written next to her name. This will specified that most of her grandmother's assets were to be left to Martha. This is the real will. Martha gasped. When she played an audio file, her father's voice rang out, Martha's engagement has accelerated our plan. We need to take every measure to ensure the inheritance doesn't reach her hands before the wedding. Her mother's voice followed, I've perfectly imitated Josephine's signature. The new will should pass without issues. Then Ashley's voice, but what if she gets married? What if Thomas hires a lawyer to investigate? That's why we need to sabotage the wedding, her father's voice was cold. Your surprise plan is perfect. She'll be humiliated, and Thomas will leave Martha. Martha closed her laptop with trembling hands. Would the SD card contain similar evidence? She called Thomas. You need to come back right away, her voice was shaking. The first Saturday in May, Martha and Thomas's wedding day dawned. The previous day's rain had cleared, and blue skies stretched overhead. The old church in Boston's suburbs and its adjacent reception hall were decorated in white and emerald green. Nervous, the makeup artist asked while applying the finishing touches. Martha looked at herself in the mirror. Strangely, not at all. In fact, her mind was calm. Over the past week, Thomas and she had formulated a detailed plan based on the evidence they'd discovered. They had enlisted the help of her grandmother's friend Doris and Martha's close friend and IT specialist, Jennifer Lee. Ready? The door opened, and Jennifer, who was also one of the bridesmaids, entered with a knowing wink. Completely, Martha answered quietly. The ceremony proceeded solemnly and perfectly. Martha exchanged vows with Thomas, gazing into his warm eyes and feeling that today would mark a new beginning. Edward and Linda sat in the front row, wearing perfect smiles. Ashley stood next to her sister as the maid of honor, displaying a gentle smile. No one imagined how the day would unfold. The reception began, and the celebration progressed smoothly. Toasts, meals, dancing, everything went according to plan. Then came the time for the cake cutting. Martha and Thomas stood before the massive 5-tier wedding cake. Edward gave a short speech, and the guests smiled as they listened. And now, the bride and groom will perform the traditional cake cutting. Edward's words were cut short as Ashley suddenly stepped forward. She was dressed in her glamorous bridesmaid gown, wearing a perfect smile. Wait. Ashley raised her fist. We're forgetting something important. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Ashley. Everyone, our family has a wonderful tradition, Ashley announced. A special surprise for the bride. Martha had been waiting for this moment. She exchanged glances with Thomas, who nodded slightly. Ashley stood next to the cake, waiting as the reception hall staff cut a portion onto a plate. When a staff member handed her a small plate, Ashley held it with both hands and turned to face Martha. Since she's the bride, this is tradition, right? With those words, Ashley pushed the cake into Martha's face. White icing and cake fragments ruined Martha's perfect makeup and splattered onto her wedding dress. The room fell deathly quiet. Edward and Linda were the first to react. What a fun surprise! They began to applaud. It's our family tradition. A few guests hesitantly joined in the delayed applause. Thomas's family and friends were clearly bewildered. Thomas's mother couldn't hide her indignation. Martha slowly wiped the cream from her face and smiled. With her face covered in icing, she quietly said, "Perfect timing." Her voice was surprisingly calm. Thomas showed a confused expression, but it wasn't an act. He didn't know all the details of his wife's plan. Martha deepened her smile and made a small gesture toward the DJ booth. The DJ saw the signal and immediately pressed a button. The large screen in the hall lit up, and footage began to play. The first image showed Edward and Linda in a study, with a date and time stamp. "Let's not tell her anything and leave all the family property to Ashley," Edward's voice echoed throughout the hall. "Martha's signature has already been forged. She'll never notice." The next footage showed Ashley in her grandmother's hospital room, taking the weak woman's hand and trying to make her hold a pen to a document. "It's all right, Grandma. This is just a prescription form." Ashley's voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold. The footage continued. The three of them were shown talking in the living room. "If we cut Martha's wedding budget and use that money for Ashley's new car, no one will notice," Linda's voice said. "And if we completely humiliate Martha with a surprise on her wedding day, Thomas will likely leave her too." The room was enveloped in complete silence. Guests held their breath, looking at each other in shock. Blood drained from Edward and Linda's faces, and Ashley wore an expression mixing anger and fear. New footage appeared on the screen. This time it showed grandmother Josephine lying in bed, talking with her friend Doris. "I want Martha to know the truth," the grandmother's weak voice resonated. "I want to leave most of my estate to her. I know Edward and Linda are plotting something. That's why I'm gathering evidence. For Martha's happiness." The footage stopped, and the room was filled with a breathtaking silence. Martha stepped forward with her face still covered in icing. Her green eyes held strong determination and quiet anger. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending my wedding," her voice was surprisingly steady. "I especially thank my family for sharing this special moment." She turned to Thomas and took his hand. "You are my true family." Thomas squeezed her hand in return. His eyes held love and pride. Martha turned back to the guests. "I want you all to know that despite attempts to ruin this day, our love remains unshaken." Her gaze fell on Edward, Linda, and Ashley. "And I want to prove to everyone here today that family is more than just blood ties." Ashley stepped forward, trembling. "This is a lie. Edited footage. Don't believe any of it." Martha still had cake stains on her dress, but her presence radiated a strange dignity. "Everyone," Martha quietly raised her voice. "Thank you for participating in our special day. And now, we've shared an unplanned moment of truth." She slowly looked around at the guests. Thomas's family, friends, and the few relatives and colleagues from Martha's side wore expressions of shock and sympathy. "For years, I've been gathering evidence of the unfair treatment I received from my family," Martha continued. "Not out of hatred, but because I wanted to know the truth. Grandmother Josephine truly loved me. She saw through everything and left me a path to discover the truth." Martha received an envelope from Jennifer and took out a sheet of paper. "This is a letter my grandmother wrote a week before she died." She began to read, her voice filled with emotion. "Dear Martha, please forgive me for not telling you the truth while I was alive. I knew that your father, mother, and Ashley have been hurting you for years. They envied your talent and kindness and tried to use you. I saw your signature being forged with my own eyes. I heard plans to steal your inheritance. But I was gathering evidence. I hope this letter and all the truth reaches your hands. My beloved granddaughter, you are my pride. Find out what true family means, through your own strength. With love, Grandma. Martha folded the letter and looked around the room again. Edward and Linda sat frozen in their seats. Ashley was trembling with anger. Lies. Ashley suddenly screamed. These videos are all edited. Grandmother would never say such things. Martha nodded calmly. Indeed, videos can be edited. Voices can be forged. But what about a notarized authentic will and an expert verification of grandmother's signature? She produced more documents. These are all legally valid evidence. They've already been submitted to the law firm, and all legal proceedings will begin tomorrow. Edward stood up. His face was pale. Martha, let's talk. There's no need to air family matters in public. Family, you say? Martha's voice was cold and clear. Have you ever treated me as family? Have you ever been on my side during any milestone in my life? Linda also stood up. Martha, you've always been. Enough, Martha cut off her mother's words. I no longer intend to listen to your lies. Thomas stood by her side and took her hand. His parents also stood up and came to Martha's side. Today, I choose a new family, Martha declared in a strong voice. Love is about giving, not taking. It's about respecting and supporting each other. At her words, Thomas's family and her close friends began to stand up one by one, gathering around Martha and Thomas. Then, from the back row, Doris slowly approached. Her eyes held a light of pride. Josephine is smiling now. Doris placed her hand on Martha's shoulder. Edward, Linda, and Ashley were isolated. As the seats around them emptied, the three tried to leave the venue in shame. Wait, Martha's voice stopped them. As the room fell silent again, Martha walked toward them. Most of the cake had been wiped from her face, but stains remained on her dress. Yet, there was a strange beauty and strength in her appearance. I don't want to end this day with hatred, Martha's voice softened. Now that you know the truth, what happens next is up to you. Edward looked directly into his daughter's eyes for the first time. His voice broke. Let's end it here for today, Martha said quietly. We can talk through lawyers tomorrow. Ashley, still shaking with anger, stormed toward the exit. Linda took her husband's arm and silently followed. After the three left, a sound like a collective sigh spread through the hall. Martha turned to Thomas and looked into his eyes. I'm sorry our wedding turned out like this. Thomas cradled her face in his hands and smiled gently. You're truly brave. I'm proud of you. He kissed her cheek and added in a low voice, besides, unlike other brides, you have the chance to dress up twice today. Martha laughed genuinely for the first time. She looked at the DJ and nodded slightly. The music began to play again, and Thomas's father stepped forward. Everyone, let's celebrate this wonderful couple, he raised his glass. And let's toast to truth and courage. Martha and Thomas were surrounded by guests, receiving warm words of encouragement and congratulations. A few minutes later, Martha left the room with Jennifer and the bridesmaids to change into a spare dress. They laughed, cried, and embraced each other. You were amazing, Jennifer said, fixing Martha's hair. I'll never forget Ashley's face. Martha smiled. What matters is what comes next. She put on her new dress and stood before the mirror. The simple, elegant ivory dress wasn't as elaborate as the first one, but it highlighted the strength that shone from within her. Now, let's go, Martha took a deep breath. Let's start the real wedding. When she returned to the hall, Thomas was waiting. And this time, a celebration wrapped in genuine love began. The cake was ruined, but no one cared. The staff had prepared another cake on the dessert table, and Martha and Thomas performed the cake cutting again in front of everyone. This time, it was a true moment, without anyone's interference, as the two took their first step into a new life together. A week later, Martha and Thomas were enjoying their honeymoon on the Greek island of Santorini. Against the backdrop of white buildings and blue sea, Martha picked up her smartphone and took a photo. "What are you posting?" Thomas sat beside Martha and put his arm around her shoulder. "This," Martha showed him the screen. She was about to post a photo on Instagram with a short text: "True family is not bound by blood, but by love and respect." Thomas kissed her and whispered, "Perfect." Waiting for the couple when they returned from their honeymoon was a letter from her parents. Martha opened the envelope with trembling hands and read the contents. Edward and Linda acknowledged their years of discriminatory treatment and expressed deep regret and reflection. "We understand the gravity of our actions and sincerely apologize for hurting you," the letter said. "Whatever relationship we have going forward is up to you, but we hope for a chance to make amends." There was no contact from Ashley. She had begun portraying herself as a victim betrayed by family on social media, but the response from people who knew the truth about the wedding was cold. 6 months later, Martha decided to meet her parents. The face-to-face meeting at a cafe was tense, but Martha saw genuine regret in their eyes. "We've repaid the entire inheritance," Edward said quietly. "And we're attending counseling every week to confront our actions." Linda tried to take her daughter's hand but hesitated midway. Martha thought for a moment and took her mother's hand. "It's going to be a long road," she said. "But I think it's worth trying." A year later, Martha's relationship with her parents was gradually recovering. It would take time to fully regain trust, but they continued their sincere efforts. Meanwhile, Ashley had completely distanced herself from the family and moved to a small town in Michigan. Her social media posts gradually decreased and eventually disappeared completely. From what they later heard, she seemed to be taking time to reflect on her actions and start a new life. In Martha and Thomas's living room hung a photo from their wedding day. In the picture, Martha stood proudly despite her face being smeared with cake. Next to it was a smiling photo taken during the latter half of the ceremony. The two photos symbolized her journey from darkness to light in her life. "What do you think?" Martha asked Thomas, resting her hand on her swollen belly. They were pregnant with their first child, and Martha was 6 months along. "It's wonderful." Thomas sat beside her and gently placed his hand on her stomach. "Our baby will grow up in a true family." Martha nodded. "We'll teach her what love is and what family means." She looked out the window. A few blocks away was the small house her parents had recently moved into. They were trying to repair their relationship with Martha in preparation for their grandchild's birth. "We can't change the past, but we can create the future," Martha said quietly. That evening, Martha called Doris. The grandmother's friend had now become part of her family. "Josephine would be proud," Doris's voice was warm over the phone. "You've become an even stronger woman than she imagined." Martha smiled. Her life had taken unexpected turns, but now she was surrounded by the true family she had built, more fulfilled than ever before.